as India is accelerating towards AI adoption, and that too also in public services, you definitely mentioned about a lot of such cases. How should this data sovereignty and AI sovereignty be governed to ensure that the citizen data which is there does not power foreign AI models, and the data doesn't belong to these AI stacks, rather it truly becomes a sovereign AI stack? How do we look at that?
I think a very pertinent question. So the two terms, the data sovereignty, and then you also have AI sovereignty. Sometimes these are used interchangeably, but actually they're not the same. They are distinct, though they are related, but they are distinct. So data sovereignty is sort of an established concept. So it means data, like say here, it means data generated within India about Indian citizens should be subject to Indian law and Indian government jurisdictions. So it's primarily a question of where the data is stored and who can access it. And India's existing data localization requirements, whether it be RBI's payment data localization mandate, IRDAI's insurance data requirements, cross-border transfer framework, which is there under DPTP, basically they address this dimension. AI sovereignty is a little more newer and perhaps a little more complicated concept. It goes beyond where data is stored and asks the question, who controls the intelligence derived from that data? So a model trained on Indian citizen health records or agricultural patterns or financial behavior encodes deeply strategic knowledge about India's population, knowledge that has value for geopolitics, for commercial exploitation, etc., etc. So AI sovereignty asks the question whether India retains control over that encoded intelligence, not just over the raw data that produced it. So this distinction matters because it's entirely possible to satisfy data sovereignty requirements, keeping raw data within Indian borders completely, etc., while failing AI sovereignty. So if a foreign AI platform processes Indian citizen data within India on locally hosted servers, but the model weights, the training gradients, the derived insights flow back to servers outside India, data sovereignty is technically satisfied, but AI sovereignty is fundamentally compromised. So this is essentially that thing between data sovereignty and AI sovereignty. Another thing that people often talk about is protectionism, and it's sort of confuse the sovereignty with protectionism. So I'll try to take an example. Say you have a farmer in Maharashtra who's using some AI model to which is giving him some advice on something to do with crop planting or this or that or whatever, climate data. And that's not working. So he says, I don't want to use this model. It's not working for me. Now, so when they look at it, they say that, oh, what is this built on? This built on some data, maybe by a California company, and it's taken data from Kansas where there's a lot of tornadoes and this and that, and it's given some advice that doesn't apply to this farmer in Maharashtra, right? So he's rejecting the model, not because the data has been built outside India or even by a foreign company. He doesn't care about that, but because the data gave him wrong advice. So when you talk about sovereignty, people always confuse it with protectionism. This is not about protectionism. It's about just the fact that the model was not built with the relevant data for the use of that citizen or the stakeholder within India. So when the farmer says, I want an Indian data model, that's not about protectionism. It's just about a model that's built on Indian data for Indian conditions, right? So we have to be careful about differentiating sovereignty and protectionism. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, but that's not always correct. Now, in fact, even our prime minister said, we've heard that expression, data is the new oil and all that. He said data is the new oil and India has an ocean of it. Somewhere he said it in some speech. Now that, to me, is a sovereignty statement. What the prime minister said. It's not a protectionist statement. What it's saying is that India's data should generate value for India under Indian governance. It does not mean that only Indian companies participate in the value creation, right? So we're probably the world's largest generator of citizen data, whether it is Digital India, through Digital India, India AI Mission, Aadhaar, Health, etc., etc. So in fact, a lot of our states use foreign companies and foreign service providers. Telangana uses Azure's AI services for citizen applications. GSTN uses Google Cloud, et cetera, facial recognition, and so on. Now, in most of these cases, the deployments are probably satisfy data localization requirements. But in terms of the AI layer, where the model training, the inference logging, and derived insight flows, that is where you have to look at whether these deployments are governed by contractual protections, and those sort of things. In most cases, the public record does not establish that such protections are in place. Now, DPDP's cross-border transfer provisions addresses the raw personal data flows that were not designed for specific sovereignty risks, but more for the cross-border data flows. So I think when we look at sort of the governance architecture that perhaps India may need is maybe mandatory AI procurement standards. I think this will be very important, that a government agency procuring an AI system that processes citizen personal data, they have to have some restrictions on using government data for model training or improvement without some written authorization, data residency for all inference processing, contractual audit rights to verify technical compliance, and so on and so forth. So how do you procure AI is an area where we certainly need to look at. So now, very quickly, if you look at sovereign AI stack, what that might look like. So obviously, you need like a sovereign compute, and the India AI mission is doing that. So that's pretty structurally, it will be there at different layers. Foundational models to be built on Indian data. So this is both a sovereignty requirement and a capability requirement. So foreign models trained predominantly on Western data, they perform poorly on India-specific tasks. So, so that's something part of this infrastructure. Then applications, a lot of these chatbots, benefit eligibility systems, fraud things, all of that have to be deployed on the sovereign compute layer so that foreign AI services may be used where no domestic equivalence exists, but only under proper mandatory, as long as they follow the procurement standards. And then, so it's the way to look at it maybe is that DPDP Act is sort of the foundation. The India AI mission is sort of provides the capability. And while the India DPDP Act addresses the individual privacy dimension, it does not yet address the collective dimension of what happens when citizen data in aggregate powers foreign AI systems. India AI mission addresses the capability dimension by building India's AI infrastructure, but there is a little bit of a gap between these two. And that is probably where our AI sovereignty framework has to bridge that gap and ensure that it's built on sovereignty principles and not so much on protectionist principles. That's how I would try to sum. I mean, this is a little difficult topic to bring in all the facets, but I hope I've tried to give you a flavor.
Yes.
Of it.